Hi, welcome to today's video. My name's Paul. So this week's video is usual sort of format, watching me doing some watercolor landscape painting, and at the same time I'll ramble on about some stuff. And the stuff I'm going to talk about this week is if I could go back in time, so if I could invent a time machine and go back about 2.5 years, what advice would I give a younger me when just getting started with watercolor painting? I thought the advice might be of some interest to some other people as well. So I think the advice would be on 3 different things, and those things from least important to most important would be materials, technical stuff, and I think the most important, artistic stuff. So first of all, materials. So I guess there's 3 things that we definitely need. Some sort of brush, some sort of watercolor paint, and paper. Watercolor painting is usually done on paper, of course. In terms of the paper, using a good quality watercolor paper is just much easier and more enjoyable, I think, than trying to use a cheaper paper. If you're going to economize on anything, I would not economize on the paper. Try and get the best and therefore most expensive paper that you can afford. And really the paper needs to be cotton paper, 100% cotton, and at least 300 grams per square meter, which in imperial units, I can't remember, I think it's something like 140 or 150 pounds, something like that. If you use paper that's thinner, or if you use wood pulp paper or a mixture of cotton and wood pulp, the problem that you'll have is buckling. When you put a lot of water on those types of paper, and you can see the amount of water that I'm putting on, you can see it running down in drips. Soaking those types of paper will cause them to buckle, and once it starts to buckle, as I say, it's not a very enjoyable experience trying to paint on that. You can go through the whole process of stretching the paper and stuff, but that needs to be done at least 24 hours in advance, and you know, if you have the time to do all of that and you have the patience to do all of that, okay, but I prefer just to use a higher quality paper that I can just pull out a sheet of paper and start doing some painting. In terms of brushes, again, I wouldn't recommend any specific brand. I've used a few different ones. It's more, for me, the shape of the brush is a big thing. So you can get mop brushes, and this brush that I'm using is a mop brush. You can also get, say, flathead brushes. Some people use the Japanese style hake or hake brush. It's just, I think you can work with either one. It's just what you're used to and what you prefer. So when you're getting started, maybe get one of each and try it out, see which one you prefer. Then the third thing, of course, is the paint itself. Again, I don't recommend any specific brand of paint. And the reason I don't do that is, so for example, I use mainly Sennelier paint, but I've heard other people on the internet saying that Sennelier watercolor paint is the worst watercolor paint that they've ever used. Some people really don't like it. So that's why I don't recommend it. I don't want to say use Sennelier and you try it and you really don't like it. So when you're getting started, maybe try a few different brands, or even just, you know, buy a tube of a certain brand and another tube of a different brand. You don't have to stick to one brand, of course. You can mix and match different ones. The next thing then would be the next big area. I should say with paint as well, one other thing would be, my advice would be use a limited palette, which basically means not using very many colors. it has some advantages that I've talked about before in other videos. But one of those advantages is when you're getting started, if you're only using 3 or maybe 4 colors, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you're trying to use 10 or 15 colors, for example. But anyway, those are the materials. The next one then is technical stuff and the sort of skills and knowledge that can help with the whole sort of learning to paint thing. So in terms of skills, I think one of the biggest things in watercolor painting, and maybe, you know, oils and acrylics and other things as well, is edges. You can have hard edges or soft edges. And if you look, for example, by edge, what I mean is, if you look at this painting, where the hill, that green hill stops, and the sky starts, that's an edge. Or the sort of blue hedgerow that I put in at the bottom of the hill, where that hedgerow stops and the hill starts, that's another edge. And edges can be hard or soft. In watercolor, that basically means controlling the amount of water that you're working with. So is the paper wet or dry? Wet paper tends to give softer edges, and dry paper tends to give harder edges. But you can change that slightly in different ways. For example, the amount of water that's in the brush will also determine what sort of edge you get. And my advice to the younger me or anybody else that's starting out is just experiment. You don't have to do a full painting, just get scraps of paper and just start experimenting with putting paint onto dry paper, putting it onto wet paper, having lots of water in the brush or not very much water, different things like this, and become familiar with how you can control edges. Using different hard and soft edges, and sometimes called lost and found edges, can make a painting much more interesting as well. In terms of knowledge, the advice I would give, and this is not just watercolor painting, any type really, composition. I think good composition can lift a painting maybe even more than the skills can. Other things like perspective, values, color theory, those are all good things to know about. The third sort of area then that I would give advice on is the more artistic stuff. So when you're getting started with any medium, you want to try and create a certain style, or you want to develop your ability to use that medium. And one of the things that I found helped me initially was I was very interested in, I liked Impressionist style painting. Impressionist painters tended to use oil paints. Sometimes, for example, Degas used soft pastels, but you didn't get very many of them using watercolor. But anyway, I was very much into the Impressionist art, and I wanted to try and create or to introduce some of that Impressionist style into watercolor painting. And giving myself that sort of goal to aim for helped give my art some sort of direction in terms of the style that I was trying to develop. I think if you don't have a style, or if you just look at, say, a certain painting, you think, yeah, that's great, I'll copy that, and then another one, completely different style, copy that. You're kind of going off in different directions. And while that may have some advantages, I think the big disadvantage is you don't have a definite goal. There's some ancient Greek saying something about, if you don't know where you're going on a ship, then there are no favorable winds, or something like that. So basically, if you have a goal that you're aiming for, it's easier, you know, you can give yourself some direction. I think that's what I'm trying to say with this. So yeah, sum up then, I think the artistic stuff, giving yourself that goal, if there's a particular type of art that you like, that can be helpful in giving your art a direction to go in. The technical stuff, knowing things like perspective and composition, values, how to use all of this stuff is really useful. Whether or not you choose to use that knowledge or not, kind of doesn't matter. The important thing is that you have the knowledge, and therefore you're able to make informed decisions about whether or not to use it. And then skills, like I say, creating different edges and controlling the amount of water that's in a brush. That's a big thing, I think, in watercolor painting. And then, as I say, the least important is actually the one that many beginners fixate on, and that's the materials. You can do fantastic paintings with all kinds of different materials. But as I said, it is easier, I think, to work with good quality paper. That's my opinion, anyway. Okay, well, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. I hope it was of some interest or use to somebody. Hopefully see you in the next video.